Those of you that don't know me, I'm Swabir from 51 Degrees. I've been installing technical networks and building operations room in conservation sites for the past 10 years. So I've done quite a lot of installations across and worked with many of the people in the audience. So without further ado, the way we'd like to run the session is, it's quite a broad subject. There's loads of inputs to an operations center. There's loads of ways of running an ops center. We've got our panel. We've put a small presentation together. We'll go through the slides and then we'll open it up to the panel and to the floor. Any points, any comments, and we have a holistic input from the floor. So, concept of ops. So, here we're talking about what is the concept of our operations, how do we bring everything together, what is the role of the operations center and the operations room, what is the OEM schedule, so how does the information come in through the operation or sent from the field through the operations center, is analyzed and goes through a reporting schedule and then back out to the field. So I'll open this one up to Eddie to discuss the concept of operations, and then we'll go on to the next slide.
Thank you very much. So obviously, before we get going on designing the ops rooms, first and foremost, you have to ask yourself why you're doing it. What exactly is the purpose? What is your end goal? So starting off with thinking about responsibility. Is there acknowledgement and acceptance of responsibility from all aspects of the organization? Okay. Often in places that I've worked, you often find that one part wants a ops room, okay, and they're very keen on it and they want to go in and get it up and running. But other parts of the organization have no idea about it or they haven't been consulted. So suddenly you've got a whole part of the organization that's not using the ops room, in which case it's no longer really a combined operations room. So make sure we have all aspects of an organization involved. Adaptability. All organizations will evolve over time. Likewise, you've got to make sure that whatever you're turning into an operations room will have the ability to adapt, to grow. If you're going to expand on the technology that you're going to be using, make sure there's that capability. End game in terms of what exactly are you expecting from the ops room? It's all great to have an ops room, but how do you measure the impact of one? Okay, you might have a big shiny screens and everything looks wonderful, and it's been going for 2 years, but it's actually made zero difference to how you're operating before you installed it. Okay, in which case it's a waste of money. So make sure that you know how you're going to be able to measure the impact of that ops room. Information, obviously when you're doing the layout, you have to be, that's front and central. What information do you want being displayed in that ops room? Which information is displayed immediately? What do you want right in front of you, which is peripheral and doesn't need to be displayed right away? And again, which is intermittent? Do you want to just check up every once in a while to see, for example, the position of a rhino? Or do you need to know the position of, for example, a response team right away? Okay. Buy-in, this is tied into responsibility, but ensure that all stakeholders are considered. So if you're working in a conservancy, for example, make sure that all aspects, security, community, research, tourism, ops room staff, management, make sure everybody has a say in the ops room and has an involvement in the ops room so they all feel that it's their joint command center, okay? And it's not just for security, okay? And then compatibility. Make sure when you're planning in terms of the technology and the hardware and the software that's going to go in there, make sure it's all compatible. Quite often, you get all these different techs and things, and then you get them all together, and a lot of them can't talk to each other. They don't function well together, okay? So in situations like this, it's very handy to have somebody who can advise you beforehand on the tech and hardware and things that you want to get put into that facility.
Thank you, Eddie. Something we get very often is when somebody's trying to get started is, where do we start? How do we get to where we want to be? And I ask them, where do you want to be, right? How do you define the problem? What is the problem for you? What is your organization trying to achieve? And how do you want to achieve it, right? And what is the data that you need out of that? These are the things or the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Does anybody want to comment on this? No? Good. Any questions so far? Okay, so you have a Joint Operations Command Center or radio room or operations center. There's so many different words for it, right? If it's a Joint Operation Command Center, it means we have multiple organizations working out of that room, right? We might be joint with the police, we might be joint with the local military, we might be joint with a different organization, right? It's a Joint Operation Command Center. It's providing 24/7 situation awareness to senior officers and provides timely, accurate, and actionable information to management and supports mission command decision making. So what is the desired end state of an operations center? We're trying to, what we often forget is the operations room is a learning environment. It's a high risk, high reward learning environment, right? Where we're getting people and our organization, our processes, and our systems and our services that we've got from the organization all come together, right? And we forget that it's a learning environment. We forget that there's people going through a learning process, yeah? It's a very high-profile room, and we need to give it that kind of profile. So the people that we put in the room, they're important, and they should be treated that way, yeah? How many organizations you just pull a ranger out of the field and put them in the operations room? Yeah? No importance, hardly any training, and they're now expected to cope with all the different data sources that are flowing into that room and all the different data flows, you know, all the pressure of the senior commanders. It's not easy, okay? Okay, so when we look at operational concepts, this is what I was talking about, the flow of data. We got our operational intelligence and environmental data coming in from the flow, from the ground. It's going into a command center, whether that's your radio room, your joint operation command center, your operations room, whatever it is. Then you have third-party information. So that can be GIS, other expertise, intelligence from the ground, which might be a different cell. And then it's going through a situational display or analysis or geospatial tool, EarthRanger, ArcGIS, Esri, you know, all different kinds of products, SITREPs, SHOTREP, carcass report, intelligence report, and all the other reports that we formulate. And that should go to our planners and commanders or strategic managers, right? So our strategic managers should be making decisions, or mid-level managers making decisions, which then enables either a request for information, more information required, orders or plans to go back through the operations center out to the guys who are deployed out on the ground, okay? That's what we're trying to achieve. And that needs to be done very timely, okay? I think some of you might have seen this loop before, the OODA loop. I'm not sure why that is there. The OODA loop, observe to action. So in the observe, we're out in the field, we want precision, accuracy, and timely data being sent, okay? Then we have IT and comms, whether that's radio, LoRa, you know, all the other IP, Wi-Fi, whatever it is that's getting your information back to your operations center. Then you have record and analyze, right? We're trying to record, analyze. This is our situational awareness. This builds our common operational picture around our operation. Then we have IT and comms, which is another enabler, which enables us now to make a decision. And the decision needs to come with clarity, right? Can't be, oh, I think, guys, we should do this, or I think this is a good idea. It needs to be complete, clear action, okay? IT and comms is then the enabler. We radio the guys or tell the guys on the ground to go and do an action, and that is a focused instruction that they will carry out, okay? And then in the ops room, if we think about the information that's in the ops room, you've got what I know. This is information that I know to be true, right? I know it to be true through different things. Maybe I've got tracking on the screen, so I know it to be true. I know he's wearing a tracker, and I can see him on the screen. I know it to be true, okay? What I didn't think I knew, what does that mean? That's third-party data, right? I might not know it personally, but he does know it, okay? So it's what I didn't think I knew. Oh, the presentation's gone haywire. Bear with me. Okay? What I didn't think I knew is information that is of a third party. And what I think I know, it's information that I know, well, I think I know it, right? But I'm not sure I do know it. And what we're trying to do is reduce what I didn't think I knew, what I think I know, and what I don't know. If we reduce all of them by using whiteboards, right? Booking in, booking out vehicles. Using pin boards to book in, book out patrols. What equipment do they have? Where is it going, right? These are also things we can now use EarthRanger for in the application, yeah? We're trying to reduce what I don't know and increase what I know, all right? And that is not just for you, but a commander or a manager who's walking into that operations center. He needs to immediately know the information that you know without asking you, because you might be busy, right? So that's what we're trying to achieve by using pinboards and by using whiteboards in our operations center. Again, it's a backup. If the power goes down, we move to a map. It's already on the wall. Yeah? It's already populated because we keep it up to date. Okay? We're thinking about things that might happen. Okay, that was concept of operations. Any questions before we kind of move on, or any discussion points from the panel? Maybe?
I think just to speak into it, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jacob Villiers, and I work for Populated Wilderness. I'm the Area Integrity Manager. I'm the Area Integrity Manager for Populated Wilderness. I was responsible for implementing an operations room about 2 years ago. And speaking to the ConOps, it's vitally important to understand what you want to do with it and what you need from it. Because you're going to go down a rabbit hole and end up having a whole bunch of unuseful things which doesn't add value. And to speak to situational awareness, it needs to be real time. You don't need to go, yes, there's analytics that happen and. But if you can't real time know what's going on, what's the point? And that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Operations room design. So we often get called in to do an assessment of somebody's operation, right? And you walk into a situation where you've got what you've got on the left-hand side there. I mean, it's not a problem, okay? It's functional, it works for them. In this situation, I didn't want to put the real pictures on because immediately the organization would know who they were. So this is just a 3D picture of their operations center. But it was really hard for people to maneuver around the room. Yeah, they were clambering over each other to try and get to that pinboard. Okay, nobody could see. They were coming in and they were huddling around a central computer screen, right? It was a really difficult room to be in, apart from it being extremely hot in there. Okay, so we created a design where now you can see, multiple workstations. We have the commander in the rear, who's now watching everything that is going on. Some people might know him as a watchkeeper or a operations room commander. He's now watching everything that's going on. He has access to the pin board without interrupting the workflow. Yeah. We have the screens which are showing our important EarthRanger data or other reporting dashboards or whatever it is that you're displaying on there, right? Which are now assisting anybody to walk into that room who's supposed to be there, vital, supposed to be there, and get the information they need without interrupting any of the workflow. Okay? So we need to consider this when we're designing our ops room in the first place. which brings me on to ergonomics. Eddie?
Okay, and if I might just add on to the design there, quite often you'll be in a situation where you're working with organizations or partners where you don't have much to work with, all right? So it's all great that we can talk about a perfect situation, but a lot of the times you're gonna be presented with a room to work with that's actually way too small. And often you just need to, you don't have the right furniture, you don't have the right lighting, anything like that, so you have to work with what you have. And in those cases, I would very much recommend a minimalist approach. Take as much out as you can possibly can to maximize the room, okay? And then talking about ergonomics, ergonomics is productivity. So how do we maximize productivity in a workspace, in an operations room? And the most important consideration is the operators within the ops room. Okay, you can have all the best technology in the world. If your operators don't know how to use it properly or aren't given the environment to use it properly, then it's a waste of time. So comfort and productivity are critical. Things like consoles, chairs, desktop layouts, configurations should be operator orientated, okay? When we put all those things, we need to consider who's going to be using them, how long they're going to be using them, how easy it is for them to move in and out, okay? Sight lines, which we'll talk about with screens a little bit later, but certainly all operators have to have an easy line of sight of all incoming information without any need for movement, okay? You don't need to get out of your way to try and see information that's coming in. That's counterproductive. Poor lighting, quite often we don't even consider the effect that this has on a person, but can cause fatigue and discomfort, okay? That's in the short term. In long term, it can actually cause real problems, okay? In terms of eyesight. Should be of an optimum brightness and hue to prevent any eye strain or squinting, minimize screen reflection, eliminate all parts of the room. Blue light, blue bulbs should be avoided whenever possible, okay? Ambient noise management to reduce distractions within the ops room, so as quiet as possible, as little sound from outside coming in. Climate control, make sure they're comfortable, so air conditioning in hot places, heating in cold areas. And then traffic flow of personnel into and out of the ops room needs to be minimized, exactly what Swabir was just talking about. Someone should be able to come in, get the information that they need without disturbing the workflow on what's happening. Okay. All right, and then moving on to the displays. So again, to minimize glare, light reflection, so we can see the information clearly from all angles. So consider that when you're choosing your monitors, make sure that they're highly visible from all angles, okay? So some of the old school monitors, once you got to a bit of an angle, you can't really see what's on screen. So screen technology to minimize that, consider organic LED, 4K, okay, and bespoke monitors. Consider adequate cooling for large displays. They generate a lot of heat in some cases, not so much with the modern technology, but some of the older ones. Consider cabling and power outlet placement, all right? Too often cabling really gets in the way. People will come in and put everything up and you got cabling on the floor all around. Apart from the obvious dangers that presents in terms of tripping up, just getting in the way in general, it's actually just quite a distraction when you're sitting there and there's all this cabling on the floor next to you. Again, that just goes in with a messy arrangement as quite a distraction. And then which computer monitors to use. Desktops must have optimal screens with high resolution, but run on display that causes least discomfort. So quite often you'll go into places and all the monitors are on maximum brightness, okay? And again, long term that can cause quite a bit of damage to somebody's eyesight and fatigue in general. So, turn down the brightness so at least that they're comfortable. And quite often the people who are in there will be quite unaware that what they're doing is perhaps hazardous to their health. So it's making sure that those settings are correct to begin with. Okay.
Some things that we've seen in the past are people just buying cheap TVs and putting them on the wall, right? A cheap TV or a TV in general is made to to be switched on around 5 hours a day, right? And you're running a 24-hour operations room. And then you wonder why the TV doesn't last more than a year, yeah? And you need to send it back to the manufacturer. Also, you'll walk into an operations room and the desk is this far away from the wall and the TVs are mounted there. And the operator sits like this all day, right? And then they stop watching the screens. And then management gets upset. Why are you not watching the screens anymore, right? But you haven't thought about that person and how comfortable they are sat in that position all day staring up at the screens, okay? So these are really vital points if you're trying to keep people interested within that room into the operation. Design and infrastructure. So we've identified the problem. We've identified how we want to resolve it. We've identified the data that we require. Now we need to identify what technology we need to transmit that data back to our operations center, right? Are we going for a radio network? You know, is there a high requirement for immediate action on that network? Are we going for a LoRa network? Are we looking at more sensory data, right? And small message packaging and sending? Are we going, you know, just to put cameras out that can go over an LTE network? All these considerations need to be made. Do I have good network? Can I just use my mobile phone out in the field, right? Am I completely cut off? In completely bad topography, do I now need to use satellite, okay? Or iridium push to talk or something like that. But that should be the last consideration now in how I get my data back to the operations room. Once you identified the problem, identified how you want to resolve it, and identify the data required out of the system, right? What is the data that I require? That is really important. Okay, and then once you do, you can start planning your network, looking at potentially putting in an IP backbone and your RF coverage over your area of operations or where your most important operations are. You might look at hybrid networks where you're using one technology in one area and another technology in another because of the topography of the land. And it's an understanding that you have some technologies which are high bandwidth and some that are low bandwidth, just like roads, right? You don't drive from your house to your destination on the same size road, right? You'll go on some high capacity roads, which are 3 or 4 lanes, which are carrying many cars, many data packets, and you'll go off on A and B routes, which are carrying less cars and less data packets, right? And you need to understand that about data transmission. Sorry? Okay. So one more consideration we wanted to go in is the total ownership cost, or some people call it total cost of ownership as well. So this is where I would like to bring the panel in to discuss what are the considerations when we look at total cost of ownership, right? We've got manning, yeah, 24 hours. We've got logistics for those people. We've got the power, yeah? Can we have a few more from the panel?
Data costs. I mean, the cost to keep the data going if you're not using an internal network.
Yeah.
Well, and then the external cost for data, which is usually the highest cost in terms of the network, if you're in an area where you have satellites only, for instance.
Longevity. If you're going to spend anything above £200,000 on a radio network and you have no training and no support, as in a service level agreement support, would you buy a BMW, drive it for 1,000 miles and then throw it into the garage and say, fix it without support? You wouldn't. They'd laugh you out of the garage. So every time you're building any of the things that Swabir has just mentioned, you've got to add the support and the training into the cost. Because ultimately, without those two things, you're throwing it over the fence and it will fail within a 2-year period.
And then you mentioned the electricity side. All right, it's on again. So one of the things that have overlooked in the past is the actual electricity and the backup. Even if the backup is there in the control room. How long does it last? So how long does that backup last? And then also, what is the priority of your people? Because we did have people in the past that have prioritized air conditioning. If you put that on the backup, it will last you 20 minutes pretty much, right? So it's one of the things that we have overlooked, and we're looking into it right now. We've got a lot of backup power in a lot of places, but often we still think of these places as having VAC and just standard power, and a small backup is enough. But we've noticed that that's usually not the case.
Yeah, last one is just software cost. Obviously, certain softwares have ongoing costs and the like, and having that in your planning is super important.
Yeah, and just following up on that in general, maintenance. Okay, so maintenance, software maintenance, hardware maintenance. Air conditioning needs to be maintained, probably every 6 months it needs to be serviced. All your computers, systems, updates, the software that you're using, don't get cut off by Microsoft at the end of the year. So, all sorts of things that need to be taken into consideration there. All right, and then also in terms of security, which is also very important, especially if you're a third party installing this for somebody else. A security question always comes up, how secure is this? So, a couple of questions just to get us started, but what security aspects are incorporated, provide a safe working environment for the people working in that ops room, but also for the equipment. So physical security, safety from attack, weather, accidents, fire, okay. Electrical security, safety from power surges, fluctuating supply, common out here, electrocution, and then software security, safety from data leaks, online intrusion, outside accessibility, server failure, okay. Quite often we get people who insist on, having servers there and then don't consider what happens once that server goes down. Where is your backup? Okay, who's manning your backup? Who's in charge of that? All right, but I'm sure there's other considerations.
Just while we're on security is operational security, and how you're going to implement that and how you're going to make sure without becoming a hindrance to the operation. Is obviously integrity is the utmost if you look at some of our applications and the like. So understanding how you're going to set up your operational security and the leveling and that is to me quite important, and how you're going to be able to audit that without, again, impeding on the actual operation and the response timing and the like. Sorry?
And just to add to your software security, one of the challenges we sometimes see is as soon as you move to Windows 10 or 11, it wants to update all the time, right? But you can imagine if you're in a place like Odzala where you have a 2 Mbps connection through a satellite, then there's 20 or 30 people working on that connection. If your computer wants to update all the time because of these security features, it can become a real challenge.
Thank you, guys. Again, it's on the reliability of equipment as well. If you've got access control, fingerprint, biometrics, people are starting more and more to put these things in to a control room. How reliable are they? Are they hindering the operation, right? Is it taking 5 minutes for somebody to get in a room because there's no power? We have to make all these considerations. And then on that, really, none of this can work, without a technology champion. Each location should identify their technology champion and encourage them to learn, right? Do more. It's highly encouraged that every single location that is looking at adopting technology incorporates a technology champion. And that person is in charge of taking that organization forward in terms of technology, is in terms of maintaining, you know, because you'll go and do an initial installation, and then within 6 months to a year, they're really struggling with their technology, right? And that's because there was no maintenance. Nobody followed up, right? And there needs to be a constant follow-up. Who's monitoring battery management? Who's monitoring that your batteries in remote sites have charge? You know, who's monitoring all of that? That's really important, okay? Is there any more considerations that you think that we might have missed from the floor? Yes?
I just want to tie into that. I mean, if you just have a look at everything that you've got here, the total cost of ownership can balloon very, very quickly. The more you put technology in, that total cost of ownership can balloon quickly if you are fully dependent on third parties to actually do things yourself. So if you can have that champion and make sure the information that champion is exposed to becomes local knowledge, that will help you to drive down or to effectively manage that total cost of ownership that's relevant to your operations, to your ConOps. And you're going to spend money on that technology champion, and the more technology you put in, the bigger the team is going to be. But as long as you keep the balance between your ConOps, the use of technology, how technology supports that ConOps, and the support for the technology, if you can manage that effectively, that's the sweet spot.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, Kevin?
Yeah, a couple of things. But, really good presentation. Thanks for sharing all that. Really valuable information for everybody. Like what you just said about the batteries there, you've got to make sure that those batteries, if you've got lithium batteries, charge them at least once every 3 months. So what I've seen in some places is they have like a bunch of spare batteries and they just keep them in storage. After they don't even use them sometimes for a year. They put them back out, try and use them, try and charge them, and half of them don't charge. It's because you're storing lithium batteries in a hot environment and they need charging every 3 months. So whoever's going to take ownership of this solution, the radio network, and everything else, needs to pull out all of those spare batteries that are in storage and run them through a charge cycle at least once every 3 months. And one of the other things about the displays is probably worth considering as well to use like commercial signage rather than like a TV. Rather than just going downtown and buying a TV from a consumer TV. If you get a commercial signage TV, you might have to get it imported from Dubai or wherever, but that TV or the commercial signage is designed to be on pretty much 24/7 constantly. So that's how it's going to be used in the ops room. So consider like commercial signage rather than a consumer television for the ops room. And also like you can see the display here, it's like a multiple display. If you protected areas in like a perfect circle, it doesn't quite fit on one display, for instance. Consider using like a multiple display like that. You have to invest in a graphics card, but you can then connect up multiple displays in whatever configuration you want. You can have long vertically. So if you've got a protected area like say Runga that's very kind of thin but really long, you can still get like that high res imagery on multiple displays that are kind of stacked vertically rather than kind of all trying to fit onto one display. So multiple displays like the one that's there now, you can branch it off so you have half the display for the protected area and then other TVs taking other inputs and displaying them as well. So it's worth considering that as well.
Perfect, thank you. The one on the displays is an interesting one, cause and effect. You change the display and, you're going to change the price of that display as well. Those displays are very expensive. So yeah, it's a way off that you need to make. Are you willing to just replace the TVs after a given set of time, or do you want to use the commercial signage displays? Any other comments? No? Lena, where is she? Yeah?
So I was just on that redundancy side as well, what happens if the power's out, especially if we're looking at geospatial systems, what happens when the TV's broken? Are you still using maps? Where are they stored? Where are they going to be there? And society's getting to the point now where it can't read a map, the rectangle in our pocket doesn't work, which is cool because I'll thrive in the apocalypse, but at the same time, how's it going to work for your control room? Where does it go? How's everything built around that as well? So.
And training. Do they have the training to
and they practice.
yeah. And putting that into practice? Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So for me, with the TOCs, there, I'm thinking about what's the total cost of staff turnover.
Yeah.
Because that knowledge sharing doesn't, it disappears with the person that you spend months training.
But we need to have better strategies at retaining these staff, right? Like I said, you can't just pull a ranger and chuck him in your operations room and hope that it all goes well. You know, we have to incentivize them, you know, give them progressive learning, open their mind up to what is possible, right? And keep that training going, incentivize them financially if it's required, right? To keep them wanting that job, because it's important. You don't want to lose that capability.
Yeah, but even sometimes, like, if you train someone up, just a consideration is that sometimes when you train a guy up, and the area warden sees that he's doing really well, then they'll transfer him to another part because his skill set is now improved to such an extent that they want him there. And then you lose that, then there becomes a gap of like, okay, cool. So I think that contingency is like, you almost have to have 2 or 3 generations of mentorship so that, you know, I work myself out of the job basically.
Yes, and I know some organizations have seconded them to the operations center, Michael. They've been fully seconded. It's a job role. It's written into, you know, the job specs of that organization, and they're fully, you know, attached to the operations center. It's not just a person taken out of the pool. Yeah.
I have more of a question. That's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
So I just wanted to see if anyone had experience of multiple organizations trying to cut down on the overall cost by working together, maybe reserves that are alongside each other, having a dual or a central like hub. And then you can work as a team. I don't know if anyone's had experience in that. I come from an area where we're outside of the protected areas, and so there's a lot of these joint operation centers all the way in the protected area, and we sit blind on the outside. So I just wanted to know if anyone had experience in working together. I don't mean like just sharing data. I mean actually setting up a network together or buying stuff together, employing staff together.
Just on my side, yeah, I've come across that in a few places. Certainly northern Kenya, with a few of the NRT conservancies have joined up in order to share resources in terms of security especially, but also with human-wildlife conflict and using that. So the use of EarthRanger with NRT is only just starting up. We're hopefully going to be rolling that out properly within the next year or so. But they have been using EarthRanger, just not extensively. But certainly what we're looking at, because there are so many of those conservancies that perhaps don't have the resources and everything else that places like, you know, Lewa and things might have, is exactly what you're talking about, sharing teams, sharing operation centers so that they can work together. But not just within NRT, but certainly some of the other conservancies up in Laikipia are now working together across the boundaries in order to join up teams and to join up in terms of the information that's coming in, sharing that with each other, and also, you know, using that to better deploy teams on the ground. So, you know, if you can see that another team from another conservancy is actually much closer to the problem compared to your own team, you can actually deploy that team instead of your own, and it just becomes a lot more, you know, a lot easier.
That is a good question. Espia brought up a good point when talking about LoRa. He said, you know, LoRa is supposed to be used by everyone. You know, you affiliate your gateway to the Things network, and anybody internationally drops into your area, their sensor should be able to ping up. So we looked at that model, and we said, all right, how can we do that, but on a closed network for conservation, right? And now we've managed to stitch together with CCF 5 locations, and more people are coming in every day. You know, and that LoRa network now helps us expand because we know the towers and the gateways are in secure locations. They're being looked after, right? And we can go now through the landscape and use all those different gateways, right? Each organization can drive across the landscape using the different gateways in different conservancies. And yeah, it's worked really well. And sometimes, unfortunately, it comes down to a lack of understanding of how the data is being passed, right? And the security around that. And that's what it comes down to. Yeah.
That was exactly what I wanted to dig on. So the good news is there's a lot of these conversations happening across the African continent. That is the good news. Unfortunately, it's not, the constraint is not technology. The constraint is more often than not that understanding of, how do we handle security and all those other things. So again, the departure is, what are you trying to solve? And go with that problem to the rest of the community, because that is going to allow you to actually understand where are those Chinese walls that needs to be erected, and how do we go about it? Because I mean, the vision is absolutely, a network is a pipe, and you can secure multiple pipes within that network. And there's beautiful things you can do from a technology point of view, but it's what's the problem you want to solve? What's the data? Who's the consumer of that data? And then get in a conversation with the community where you have people that's got the technical knowledge to actually explain it within that context. That's usually important.
Kieran, last question.
Yeah, just to add to what Eddie said, so I work with NLT, and one of the things we've seen, we've got probably, as it comes when it comes to the operations centre and the neighbour. But the reality is the 43 consultants we're working with and gathering data from have no idea. So the benefit of having, like Eddie was saying, these multiple sort of mini jobs, which then feed into the central job is critical, because then the data is actually used on the ground, where it needs to be used around the decision making. So that's our whole next progress is to multiple systems to devolve it basically.
Can I just add one thing? And we've already mentioned from the back on power, and actually how important it is, not just on the radio side of stuff, but we mentioned LoRaWAN, okay? If you can put a sensor on your solar panels, which are connected to your batteries, and then monitored in your ops room, and we do this in the UK, and we've got about 30 sites that we monitor power. If I know what the weather's doing, and I know you get rainy season and all sorts of other stuff, right? And I can see what the solar panels are doing, I see what the batteries are doing, I know what the radios are doing without even looking at the radios, because I know what the solar's doing, I know what the battery's doing, so I know the repeaters are going to work. Okay, and then I can monitor the radios separately. So sensors for your solar systems are very, very cheap, and most of you now have got LoRaWAN systems and you've got data. So please, when you're planning your infrastructure, think about small, low-cost power sensors, because if you understand what the power's doing, 9 times out of 10 you know what the infrastructure's doing, and it saves you a lot of money, because ultimately if the batteries don't go flat, as Kev mentioned at the back, then you have to go and buy some new ones. Okay, if those batteries never run out because you're managing the power, then you're saving yourself money, return on investment, and those sensors cost very small amounts of money. $100 for a decent sensor will last you many, many years. Okay?